All right. Welcome everyone to another webinar from Evernym, this one on self-sovereign identity and privacy by design. We are very excited to present on this topic because privacy is one of the core values at Evernym and one of the things we've been trying to champion in the market since the founding of the company. So, and we have a very special webinar here for you today because we have a very special guest. So very pleased to have everyone here. And so I'm Drummond Reed. I'm at Evernym. I'm Chief Trust Officer here, which means I'm responsible for our overall identity, security, and privacy architecture. And I am thrilled that our guest today is none other than, I call her the mother of privacy by design, Dr. Anne Cavoukian. Anne, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Hi, Drummond. It's such a pleasure to be with you here today. I'm delighted to explore this topic. There's so much that needs to be said. And just a little bit of background for those who may not be familiar with what I do. I started out as Privacy Commissioner of Ontario, Canada, a long time ago for 3 terms, 17 years. And while I was there, I created something called Privacy by Design, which is all about being proactive about privacy protective measures so you can prevent the privacy harms from arising, not just address them after the fact with regulatory compliance. And I also just quickly want to say, get rid of the zero-sum mindset. Privacy by design is all about privacy and security, privacy and business interests, privacy and, not privacy versus. It's not a win-lose like zero-sum, it's a win-win. We can do this.
Wonderful, and we're going to go deep into every one of those points that you're making there about privacy by design, Anne. And you are now the principal of Global Privacy and Security by Design, based in Toronto. Is that right?
Toronto, Canada. Yeah, I was doing commissioner work for a long time. Then I taught at the university for 5 years, and people kept saying, "Start a consulting firm. We need your advice and things." So I finally did that 2 years ago, and I head up the Privacy and Security by Design Center.
Excellent. All right. Well, we're gonna get an hour's worth of your advice here today, and I'm very much looking forward to it. So our agenda is very simple today. This is a fireside chat where we're going to be talking with Anne. We have a set of questions we'll be going through for roughly the first half. But at that point, this is going to be very interactive. We want everyone in the audience to be asking questions. We encourage you to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen to post the questions there. Some people will do it in the chat, but it's easiest if you to structure the questions if you use that Q&A button, and feel free to ask a question at any point. Our webinar wizard Alex will compile those, and then we'll try and get to as many of them as we can in the hour that we have. We have yet to ever get through all the questions, and we've warned Anne that's the way it goes, but we will do our best to get to as many as we can. So with that, let's go ahead and kick it off and get into the meat of it. So Anne, we should start out as you and I have discussed at some length. It's sort of hard to pick up a newspaper today and not see some article about vaccine passports, right? So why don't you come right out and tell us just, how do you really feel about vaccine passports?
I hate them, Drummond. I hate the idea of a vaccine passport, that you have to demonstrate some health-related issue to a variety of bodies. Now, I'm also a realist. I understand they're here. We have to deal with them. So let's make them as privacy protective as possible. But let me just read one quote to you of an individual who was not identified in this article, but the quote speaks for itself. It says, quote, "Vaccine passports are setting up a national caste system and a spying apparatus unlike anything in our history," end of quote. And I think the reason they're saying that is it's going to extend well beyond travel. I understand you can't get on a plane unless you demonstrate you've had a vaccine or something like that. We have to do that in a way that preserves control of that information by the individual, to the individual digitally. They may have to reveal it when they get to the airport in order to board the plane, but that's it. There shouldn't be any retention of that data centrally anywhere where third parties unknown can gain access to it, or governments can use this information for a variety of purposes. When I was privacy commissioner, and for many years, I saw how much governments like to take over control over information. They want to be all over it, use it in ways that you and I have never consented to. And privacy is all about control. It's about personal control over the use and disclosure of your personal information. And I fear that we will lose that control through instruments such as vaccine passports.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. Now, as you know, because you helped contribute to it as we began the Good Health Pass Collaborative, and we wrote the initial principles paper, and then are following what we call the interoperability blueprint. We actually included a page that explained why the term passport is the wrong term to use for a digital health pass.
Yes.
You want to go into that? Why is passport the wrong metaphor people should be using?
Well, you see, the term passport is associated in a very narrow manner with the way we've had passports in terms of countries we live in to demonstrate that we exist in that country, and you reveal the passport when you're traveling or things of that nature. But it's a very narrow application, and it should not be outrageously expanded in this example. Vaccine passports, because trust me, this will extend beyond vaccine in terms of COVID vaccination. It will extend to other areas that were never even considered at the time. They want to make sure, who knows, what are bad things, that you don't have certain ailments associated with you, or you aren't disease prone, or I can't even imagine them, but this will extend beyond. So the notion of passport, we should preserve it as a very narrow application, the way it's traditionally been used in terms of travel and residency.
I could not agree more. There are a couple of characteristics of a traditional passport that one, for example, they're limited in issuance, right? You can only get it from a government, and you got to meet certain conditions. And do either of those apply to a COVID test or a COVID vaccination?
None whatsoever.
Right. And the other perspective, which really I feel very strongly about personally, because Evernym produces, or one of many companies producing verifiable credential technology, which is being adopted in the healthcare industry to give you control of your personal health records, right?
And I love that, because as I said, privacy is all about control, and there's nothing more sensitive than your personal health information.
Exactly. So provided that we're going to talk a lot more about how we make sure that that is under your control. We're empowering individuals to have their personal health records as verifiable credentials. And from that perspective, a proof of a test or a proof of vaccination is just one of your personal health records. I think the part where it gets controversial is when that's being required. You're being required to show it in context where it doesn't make sense, right?
Right. Because they're already talking about, oh, you're going to go to a football game, or you're going to go to a concert, you're going to have to reveal that. Completely out of context, but it's going to grow dramatically.
Right. Well, I'm in agreement with you. I've been part of a number of conversations where it's like, okay, we don't know. We know that, for instance, for international travel, right, where governments set the requirements for coming in or out of a country, we don't really have any choice. And
right.
there, we've had things like yellow cards, right? And the WHO, I'm a member of the expert group there that is saying, okay, how do we have the digital version of the yellow card so we can have a vaccination history you can prove? So one way or another, we say, okay, we need to have these credentials. We have the paper version today, but the paper version, I like to contrast it. And when you have paper credentials, like literally the ones in my wallet right here, right? Why are those privacy preserving? What's the nature of paper credentials in a wallet? Uh, how do those help you preserve your privacy?
Theoretically, those paper versions that you have in your wallet, Drummond, are owned by you, retained by you. And, yes, someone can steal it or something of that nature, but absent that, you decide who you want to reveal it to, a particular piece of identification. Who do you want to share this information with? That's what's critical. The problem once we go digital is we have to ensure that this information doesn't become centralized. We need decentralized models where the individuals can retain control over their information and who they decide to reveal that information to. We have to nail this. It's absolutely critical. Centralized models will just bode the death of privacy.
Yes. So you're highlighting that one of the things, like when I go to an airport and I show one of these credentials to get onto a plane, the only person seeing it is the TSA agent or airline boarding agent that's looking at it, right? And they're not retaining any copy of that information, right?
That's right. Exactly. And
Right.
that's the beauty of it.
So and some of the fear around not just vaccination passports, but digital credentials in general, the fact that it's a digital transfer of information and suddenly the verifier can keep a copy of anything you're presenting, right?
Absolutely. And that's why we have to ensure decentralized models of this digital data. It cannot be, it will be shared by everybody if it's retained in a centralized manner. And, hundreds of people can gain access to it without your consent or notice or anything. If you have a truly decentralized model, it's comparable to having a piece of paper that you're showing to someone and then you're putting back in your wallet. You reveal the digital information to the travel agent or whoever. They see it. They can record the fact that, yes, you have a vaccine or whatever the requirement is, and end of story. Then you retain control of the digital passport and they don't get it, the vaccine passport.
Bingo. So would you say that, again, quote, vaccine passports, digital health passes are just the tip of the iceberg of the arrival of verifiable credentials? And I use that term because the actual standard from the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, is called verifiable credentials, that they're digitally verifiable. Would you see then that the introduction of these verifiable credentials is an inflection point for privacy by design, as you've been pursuing it for, 2 decades now?
Absolutely. We have to embed privacy by design into all of these new digital devices, points of entry. Because if we don't, then you have no control, you have no privacy. But one of the essentials of privacy by design is privacy as the default setting, which means that the individual doesn't have to ask for privacy. No, we give you privacy automatically. Your information may only be used for the purpose intended that you consented to, that you're revealing it for, and end of story. After that, it shuts down. Others do not have digital access to it. That decentralized model is absolutely critical. I can't repeat that enough, Drummond.
Yes, no question. So let's talk about a couple other aspects of privacy by design. You have your 7 major principles as they would apply now to, to digital credentials in general, and again to digital health passes. So another one of the principles is minimal disclosure, right? Only share the information that's necessary. So from the technology side, we often call that selective disclosure, the ability to only show what a verifier really needs. How important is that?
It's critical because the only information when you're traveling, for example, that is relevant is the fact that if they require a vaccine before you're allowed entry onto a plane, you reveal the fact that you have obtained a vaccine. It's right here. So I've satisfied that condition. I can board the plane. End of story. They shouldn't have access to any more information. They shouldn't be able to share that information with third parties unknown. These are the critical features we have to embed into the system, which is what privacy by design is all about.
Bingo. So another common characteristic of digital signatures, right, that are applied to these credentials so you know they're valid, is that a digital signature is big long string of numbers, that is globally unique. Which means that even though it's essential for trust, it's sort of like having, you know, the seal or the a hologram on a physical credential. The situation is, because you need to present that in the digital credential, you presented what some people call one of the most correlatable identifiers in the world, right? With each time you do it. So what do we need to do about that aspect of the digital cryptography?
We have to restrict the use of that information dramatically. The whole idea of secondary use of this type of data cannot be accepted for the reasons you just outlined. This is very sensitive data. It could be correlated when you used it in other places, and that was never the intention. So it can only be used for that one-time application that you are consenting to, and that's it, end of story. We have to get that messaging out there.
Right. Now, I'm going to branch over to the topic of there's what the technology can do, but if the verifier needs the information, right, whatever you verify, and it has to be shown, then we need, you know, once the information has been transferred, sort of like the rabbits out of the, or the cat's out of the bag, how you know, the tools we have today for saying, well, what is a verifier doing with information, are privacy policies, right? And you know, there have been a lot of issues around, you know, the effectiveness of privacy policies. So, but with verifiable credentials, and this, we're introducing this new tool of governance frameworks, which don't apply typically to individual sites. They apply to whole uses of particular verifiable credentials, like digital health passes. What's your view on what kind of enforcement can we is that going to be a new tool for helping provide that enforcement that verifiers are going to live by what they say they're going to do?
Well, we have to rely on encryption as well. We haven't talked about encryption yet. It's absolutely critical. It's one of the ways you can safeguard this information so that it can't be used by third parties unknown for unauthorized purposes. And, you know, something we haven't talked about yet, but we have to. There are all kinds of fake vaccine passports that have come on the market. I couldn't believe how quickly this happened. I was just reading something this morning about massive number of fake models that are coming out. So we have so many challenges facing us, and we have to address them all.
You're right. That's my wife was the one who pointed out to me, hey, there's a New York Times. It was the front page of the business section, entire article about the market for you know, fake vaccine passports, which is, of course, why we have to have them digitally signed by the authorized issuers. Okay, which takes us back into, okay, but that provides this correlatable identifier unless you apply the right technology around it. But first, before we go into that, you talked about encryption and the importance of sort of standardizing on encryption, so your information is protected and it's only available to the parties that you're authorizing to do that. There are various forms of encryption out there, but you talk about, with privacy by design, end-to-end encryption. How important is end-to-end encryption?
Oh, it's critical. I love end-to-end encryption because what it basically says is the sender who is sending you the information, it's only intended to be received by the intended recipient, let's say me, and no one can theoretically access the data from end to end when you have that kind of encryption, other than the sender and the authorized recipient. This is critical. But let me also tell you, there are so many attempts to crack this. Backdoors, crypto backdoors are nothing new, dating back to the late 90s with the first Clipper chip that was created by the NSA. And that was debated for well over a year. And everyone at the end of the year said, no, we cannot have this kind of crypto backdoor. It will completely disrupt the amazing trust we have in end-to-end encryption, et cetera. But this thing is rearing its ugly head all the time. And in 2015, a group of 15 of the world's leading cryptographers put out this amazing paper called Keys Under Doormats against crypto backdoors, just as you might put a key under the doormat to enable your child to gain entry into their home if they lost their key. It'll also enable the bad guys, the thieves, to gain entry into your home. It would just open up the door for so many unauthorized access to your data. This is growing dramatically. But I should also tell you, it hasn't gone away. India is now looking at this, and they're not calling it a back door. They're calling it, well, we just need to gain access to the sender's information. Just a little bit of information is required. It's nonsense. It's the same thing, and they're fighting it very strongly in India. But it's also being, addressed as a big thing. So we constantly, it's like point counterpoint, it's like a chess game. We constantly have to be on top of these intrusions into our privacy.
Yes, absolutely. So since we're on the subject of cryptography and this issue of end-to-end encryption and digital signatures, so you can the verifier of a credential can rely. Yeah, that really came from an issuer. There is a branch of cryptography that's designed to deal with that, to provide the encryption of the information and the verification of the information without the correlation of the information, and that's zero knowledge proof cryptography. How just broadly, how important do you feel that is in the evolution now of privacy by design?
Huge. It's absolutely huge, because the two parties, the intended recipient and the sender, can have confidence in the fact that their information will be exchanged between them, but not to others, not to third parties. And it's critical. Zero knowledge proofs is amazing. And Drummond, you know more about this than me, so tell me a little more about it.
All right, I'm going to give us something in our audience, something to look at here. I will share a short set of, ironically, I was on another webinar this morning asked to, explain this same thing. And so I'm just going to run through a brief set of slides and we'll talk about, and this, Anne, is the reason, of course, as you know, I'm so passionate about this, is that with these new standards for verifiable credentials and decentralized identifiers, that's another W3C standard, I'm the co-editor of that specification,
Yes.
We have the chance to implement privacy by design at a scale that's never been possible before, right? Not just as point solutions, which is important, but at real scale. So, and this, again, this is just a centerpiece. Anyone who would like this presentation, we can make it available. These slides are in multiple, but this is the basic, what we call the trust triangle with verifiable credentials. It's true for all credentials. We have issuers of the credentials, holders that keep them in their digital wallets, and then verifiers like an airline or a border authority or an employer or whoever needs to see a credential. And you notice that we don't just say, hey, you just show the credential to the verifier. You show what we call a proof or presentation of the credential, which does not have to be the entire credential, right? And it can be, and there are forms. The W3C standard supports several different ways of encoding and signing the credential to go over to the verifier. Now, all of them support the idea that the issuer puts their public key on some kind of what they call a verifiable data registry, like a blockchain, so that all the verifiers, when they receive a proof, it will have the DID of the issuer, the address of that public key, and they will be able to retrieve it and verify that proof, right? So that's how we decentralize the public key infrastructure, so we can have that trust. But again, the problem we bring up is the issuer's signature on that verifiable credential is a great big long number that has to be exactly the same every place you present that credential, which means you are basically, if you don't use zero knowledge cryptography, you're building in a tracking beacon to every credential you're issued, right?
Right.
It is just, and this problem, those of us working on the underlying technology, we recognize this way back at the time that the standard was being developed. So Evernym led the group that said the standard must include support for zero knowledge cryptography. And there are two ways, and we're going to talk about both of the points here about end-to-end encryption and zero-knowledge cryptography. So what we said is it's great to use a public blockchain for the issuers that have to be well known and widely verified, but for relationships between holders, particularly let's talk individuals. Of course, holders can be organizations or even things, but for individuals, we still want to use DIDs, but in a different way. We want these two parties to be able to exchange directly, privately, and what we call pairwise DIDs that no one else in the world needs to know. And as you know, when I first started talking to you about this, this isn't just for the exchange of verifiable credentials. This is an encrypted private channel for those two parties to use for any communications they need for as long as they both want it, right?
Beautiful.
There's no info, no intermediary there in that channel, right? That is end-to-end encryption. And when the holder has sets up a different relationship here with the verifier, it's a different set of pairwise peer DIDs,
Nice.
right? So
nice.
those channels, and the beauty of this, and this is just the end-to-end encryption part, is that means that everything above this line is all off-chain, never touches a public blockchain.
Beautiful.
All GDPR compliant.
Beautiful.
Right. This is I call it tenet number one of privacy by design at scale, which is peer DIDs, private pairwise connections, any place you need them. And, which is interesting, and because it means your wallet. I mean, I tend to think of this as this has my credentials in it, right? But it's not my address book. Well, as you are forming these relationships, your wallets is keeping track of your DIDs and their DIDs. It is now a cryptographic address book, right? For all your connections. And you are the only one that has all that, right? It's not shared, doesn't live on Facebook, doesn't live on Google, right? Exactly. So then here's the second aspect, which is, and I like to point out, that means, and this is very important, there's a lot of perception when verifiable credentials and self-sovereign identity came up. Oh, that means you need blockchains for everything. No, you only need blockchains for what's below that line. You do not want them involved above the line, right?
Beautiful.
Right. Okay, so now let's talk about zero knowledge cryptography. If the holder does not have a public DID, then how does the holder prove that the credential was issued to them? Right? How am I not going to be able to take my credential issued with my Washington driver's license and just give the digital copy to one of my two sons, right? They both are driving age now, but before they were, right? So the answer in zero knowledge cryptography is that in the wallet, you have something called the link secret. It's a little like a private key, but it's not actually a private key, but it is a very long number and nobody knows it. In fact, you won't even know it because it's buried down into your wallet, okay?
Wow.
But with that value, and in fact, an important part, that value is never revealed to anyone. But what happens when a credential is issued with zero knowledge cryptography, what's called the derivation of that value is given to the issuer, and they use it to ZKP encode the credential. And that's what goes into your wallet. You are, at that point, the only one in the world that can produce a proof of that credential.
Wow.
And what you can produce is a zero knowledge proof of that credential.
Beautiful.
Which means,
I love it.
Yeah, it can include everything in the credential, just like you weren't using any zero knowledge, right? If you need to know everything, it's something like a health record, you got to go to your doctor and say, yeah, here it is, okay?
Yeah.
But with zero knowledge cryptography, you can do selective disclosure, where you can say, oh, you really only need to know about, this particular health condition, or that, I had, back surgery on this date or something, right? And that can apply to any credential that you have issued, any set of attributes or claims inside of them. You only revision, and verifiers are then able to ask for only what they need.
Wonderful.
And
it's fabulous.
Exactly. Now, so there are two key points here. You have selective disclosure of the information, and there's a powerful thing that we call compound proofs, which is no matter how many credentials I have in my wallet, a verifier can make a single request for just what they need to know, And my wallet can put together just from the different credentials, here's what you need. You don't, the verifier doesn't have to know, do you have this credential and do you have that credential, right? It's just what they need to know. The second key piece, which from a privacy standpoint, I think is just as important, is with zero knowledge proofs, when you produce them, you're also producing a proof of the issuer's signature. You're not sharing the issuer's signature. And every time you produce that proof, it's different.
Wow.
So what that means is when you're presenting to a verifier, the verifier cannot correlate you on the basis of the information that you're providing in the proof. Now, if the verifier says, I've got to know, or I'm the US government, for example, I've got to know your social security number, right? You're filing your taxes. Well, then you have to share that, but you're sharing that intentionally inside the credential. You're not automatically sharing it just by the virtue of sending over a cryptographic signature. Does that make sense?
So it's fabulous. It's total control on the part of the data subject.
That is the whole point. And it also means that we're going to set expectation. I know we're going to get into this in the questions. A lot of folks are worried now with the introduction of digital credentials that we're going to enter into a papers, please society, right? Where any verifier is going to be able to say, oh, yeah, prove all the following information to me, right? I just know you've got it behind one button, so you can just do it. And that, I think, is a legitimate concern, but one of the issues is that the holder can require the verifier, when it asks for a presentation of proofs, to sign it, so that literally the wallet software can say, first, I'm going to verify this as a real verifier that I can trust to give this information to. And secondly, the holder has proof now. If the verifier is overreaching, if they're asking for information they should not be asking for, then every single holder that shows up there gets proof, right? So we have a new way of, I think, addressing some of the asymmetries of power we've got out on the sharing of personal data today.
And that's so important because there is so much asymmetry presently. So that's critical.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, this is what I wanted. We got deep into this topic because we're talking about privacy by design at scale. So I wanted to share this just to get into that. Now,
it's great.
I want to get over to the many questions that are piling up here. Let me just we've covered everything else. I want to still ask you, do you we're talking about vaccination, quote, vaccination passports or digital health credentials, digital passes, but do you believe if that is a driving use case, that is going to set a precedent for what happens with the rest of verifiable credentials?
It makes me really nervous, Drummond, because I think that's the direction right now things are taking. And so there may be a growing demand for this kind of verifiable, vaccine passport. There's the IATA travel pass. There will be so many of these that appear. So we have to be very, very careful in terms of verifiable credentials and preserving the authenticity and the control associated with it. I should also mention, there is such a growing trust deficit right now, everywhere, globally. There is so little trust on the part of individuals with respect to their information being held either by governments or by private sector entities. It's absolutely huge. Privacy by design grows trust dramatically. It builds trusted business relationships. And I'm now extending it because people have asked me to do this. I'm now teaching a new course called Trust by Design, which is privacy by design. So stay tuned.
It sounds like maybe Chief Trust Officer should be attending that course on trust.
I think so for sure. You can be the first one.
I'm happy to know that, or I'm happy to share that that is a title that now Lumedic, who is an Evernym customer that is producing verifiable credentials for patient-centric healthcare data exchange. They recently appointed a chief trust officer, and I think it is a position we're going to start seeing in more companies.
Yes, it's vital.
Yeah, for that reason. All right, well, let's, we have, looks like about 20, 21 minutes left, and we're going to dive into the pile of questions that are coming across.
Okay.
And I'm going to start out with one that's going to sort of lead us into the good health pass topic. The question from Loretta is, what standardization of SSI and verifiable credentials is going to be needed for the cross-border interoperability that we will need for instance, international travel? And I know that's a very broad question. Maybe you want to say a few words about introducing Good Health Pass Collaborative and what its goals are.
Yes. And that's the beauty of the Good Health Pass Collaborative is it is being designed to serve as a blueprint for all of these vaccine passports and other instruments that you're going to be hearing about. So Drummond and I work very closely with Identity 2020, who's developing this. And the whole point of the Good Health Pass Collaborative is precisely to embed the necessary privacy protective features that are essential by design. Yes, it has to achieve the purpose it's intended to achieve and strongly protect privacy. That's what privacy by design is all about. As I mentioned, not zero sum, not either or. You have to have the passport, forget about privacy. No, you don't forget about privacy. And if I can just mention one thing, you're going to hear a lot of people saying that, well, we need public safety, so we have to put privacy aside. No, you don't. You never put privacy aside. Privacy forms the foundation of our freedom. You do both. And that's what the Good Health Pass Collaborative is doing.
Exactly. And as I just, actually, I do have, I've realized I've got a slide here that I could bring up if I start to do this, because it was right at the end of the presentation I was doing this morning. I'll summarize it. Hang on, give me a second. It's right here. I'll go to this and share my screen again. The depth of the work going on in Good Health Pass Collaborative right now is, the way I summarize it, it's the most intensive interoperability effort in the identity industry, possibly in the internet's history. These are the 9 drafting groups currently underway in a brand new, established 3 weeks ago, working group at the Trust RIP Foundation called Interoperability for a Good Health Pass. And the reason for these 9 is they were the 9 areas where we said, if we want real interoperability of digital health passes worldwide, we have to solve these 9 problems. There's basically 8 what we call interoperability challenges plus this one, which is a governance framework, what we call a global or general governance framework for all digital health passes. They will then create their own specific governance frameworks and say, yes, here's how we comply. And this is how we do trust, whether in a particular country, in a particular industry, like IATA for the airline industry, or a particular application, such as there are some out there right now in Singapore and in the UK, where they've already said, hey, we got a country-specific solution. Great. All of them can interoperate if we have solutions to these problems. So we don't have time today to go down into this. However, I have put the link in the chat, and anyone is free to engage if you really care about this. Yeah, the Good Health Pass Collaborative, just contact them there, and or feel free to get directly involved with the work at Trust RIP. So that's
that's great.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
pretty deep answer to that question. I hope that's helpful. All right. Oh boy, I'm seeing one that just popped up in the chat. Dr. Cavoukian, please can you suggest a good text on understanding computational trust in the time of ubiquitous cloud computing? That's a big broad one.
That's a big one, and I'd have to think of the specifics. If you take a look at some of the privacy by design papers that I've written, I address some of those issues, but not exclusively. So I am gonna, if you go to my website, there's a lot of material there. And in terms of cloud, can you think of something, Drummond, to complement that?
I can think of a couple papers. I'm going to recommend actually the references in the what we call the Good Health Pass Interoperability Blueprint outline, and I'm going
to yes.
put that
yes.
link I just put into the chat.
Excellent. That's a wonderful one to look at.
Yeah, and there are a whole set of references inside that to each of the challenges. So that I would say that's a really good starting point.
Great.
All right, I'm seeing another, really good question that was specifically about what we were showing about the private pairwise DIDs, which is, does a pairwise DID only exist in the specific wallet the holder has used? Is it transferable to other wallets? The related question, what's the interoperability between different SSI blockchains? That's probably more of a question for me, Anne. So
Yes, please.
the short answer is yes, your pairwise DIDs are transferable between wallets. It has to be done carefully. It's not just a matter of just copying over files. But that is a critical, there's no assumption you're going to have, I mean, most people do have one physical wallet, but most of us, or many of us, have more than one digital device today. You need your digital wallet to operate on all those devices. That is actually a very complex, technical problem, but the verifiable credential community is well working on it. Evernym is on the job, and we intend for your wallet, for you to be able to have wallets on multiple devices. I'll actually point out that's a fantastic security feature because your wallets can literally be watching each other. And no, seriously,
I love it.
and one of the beauties there is if you then lose a device or somehow it gets broken or compromised, you can then recover from your other devices. And that's it's very we've even talked about literally have just as I tend to use a lot of Apple devices. It recognizes other Apple devices in this household. Well, you can also recover from others, and we call it social recovery, recover your wallet from other devices if you lost all of your devices or something like that happened. So there's an answer there. Okay, now I'm going to go to the next one, which takes us back over to governance frameworks. Anne, what do you see as the key feature of a governance framework that seeks to capitalize on the the metadata stored and created in a decentralized network? Now, they provide an example here. This is from Philip H., such as broad epidemiological data. So sharing, for instance, of a large population of individuals saying, and I know you spent a lot of time with this, sharing anonymous health data with a pool, and but not requiring that all the individuals get this constant barrage of consent requests. So I know you've spent time, Anne, with privacy by design and big data. How would you recommend approaching that?
So it's really critical in that context for epidemiological research and and I'm very pro research, health research, epidemiological research. We need this, of course, but we have to ensure that the data used has been strongly de-identified in an effort to anonymize the data. There are how do you de-identify it? Poorly and very well. You have to use very strong de-identification protocols combined with a risk of re-identification framework so that you can truly minimize the likelihood of re-identification dramatically. You can use it. Professor Khaled El-Imam, who I work with, for example, he has a technique. He can reduce the likelihood of re-identification to less than 0.5%. 0.5%. And that's like less than the odds of being hit by lightning if you go outside when it's raining out. Damn good odds. That way you strip the privacy concerns associated with the data, but the data can be used for much needed medical research, epidemiological research. Very, very important. But you have to go to great lengths first to strip the data strongly of the personal identifiers, and that's a protracted system. So you have to take your time to do that. Once the privacy risk has been removed from data, then you're free to use the data in a variety of purposes that are extremely helpful to research. So I'm a big fan of research. It's critical. We need this, and we need privacy. We can do both.
Absolutely. I know you have spent a lot of time on that, so I'm also a big fan of that. One thing that I'm believe that's is going to really enable a much broader set of uses of that is when we have digital wallets and the credentials with that verified data that where now it's an individual choosing, I can share that with a pool. but they're trusting the governance framework of that pool, right? And the representation is being made, and it literally becomes just a button. And they're between their agent and the pool, the data will be de-identified. Now, it then comes up, well, what if something's discovered? For instance, I'm sharing, genetic information, and they discover something, and they do want to notify me, right? And I want to be notified. And I like to point out, guess what that private channel's for, right? That's the pairwise connection I've established there. I can establish in my end, this is what I want to be notified about, right? And when you notify me, I know it's not someone spoofing or anything else. It's like, okay, that was just what I asked for, right? So
See,
go
that's
ahead.
perfect because that's a trusted system. It's wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's see. A common question that comes up here. What happens if the attribute or claim being that a verifier is asking for is not in your credentials, right? What do you do? I'll take that one quickly. And
Yeah.
That really comes down to the design and the value add of a good digital wallet, digital agent app. And also the verifier can assist, because the presentation request can include basically hints or instructions. Here's where you can go to get it, right? So for example, if they're saying, in this case, it's like, oh, we need a certain type of test, you don't know where to, they can literally pass and say, here's where you can find out where to get it. Now the IATA Travel Pass, they reversed that. They actually said, we're going to build into our digital wallet app. You start, say, here's the itinerary I want to travel. It will then consult a rules engine, their thematic rules engine, and come back and say, well, then this is the set of tests and or vaccinations you will need, right? And then it will literally, in your jurisdiction, all of it is by consent, right? You just want to say, okay, well, I live here, where can I get that? And that's what they'll tell you. So that's it, and you can again design it any place across the process. I call it the wizard experience, right? You just you get instructions about the information you need. Now, of course, part of the beauty I like to point out is each time you do that, and now you have the credential, you don't. It's like not having to retype information anymore, right? You just once it's in your wallet, now you can start to share it. Okay, let's keep going here. Oh, this is another, let's see, okay. Oh, okay. When you hand over your verifiable credential with your personal data to the verifier, also called the relying party, for verification, and they're checking the signature from the issuer, okay? So if they need access, I see. This is built into this question. The questioner is asking Ulrich, saying, well, they need access to the full digital, they need the whole credential because they need to ensure that if the digital signature is accurate, it works over the whole credential. So I will actually just jump right in there and say that is true for conventional digital signature, conventional cryptography. With zero knowledge proofs, the verifier does not need access to the full credential. You can prove anything about that credential down to an individual claim, and you can still prove that that was, that claim, as for instance, it might be, your date of birth, or your name, or the fact that you were vaccinated. You can still prove that without having to reveal the original issuer signature. So it's why privacy by design it's why we need to build it in to the digital credentials, right from the outset. And it's why it comes down to really, where do I have that? I'm going to grab this. I'm going to share one more picture here because I don't want anyone coming to this webinar today to go away without this very, very clear message, okay? With verifiable credentials, the W3C standard supports this entire spectrum of privacy, right? And there are absolutely credentials all the way over here at the far left where
Yes.
you want the credential for, you know, a public corporation, right? An IBM or a government or
Yeah.
a university or your school. Yes, these are public records, right?
And they have to be accessible.
And they have to be accessible, and you want to be, and if they're digitally signing something, you want to know it's really them, right?
Yes.
But credentials issued to individuals, above all with sensitive personal data like healthcare, they need to be all the way over at this end of the spectrum.
Yes. Yes.
And that's the key is when you hear, oh, we've got a verifiable credential or it's W3C compliant, the question you need to be asking is where does it fall on the privacy spectrum, depending on what it's being used for. So
right on.
yeah, exactly. And we've covered all these points about what this is, but I just want to make sure anyone attending here today goes, the key is we want to do privacy by design. We have to have this end of the spectrum covered. Okay, so again, we've got about 5 minutes left. As always happens, and the questions start to pile up. They come in fast and furious as we've got other questions. Let's see. It's Ulrich, I'm seeing in the chat, he was saying that was not my question. You have to disclose the data required, and those can be okay. Now I see his question. This gets us into the anti-coercion discussion that you and I had in. So Olga is saying, okay, let's say the verifier, the relying party, needs to have the data presented. Could be a border control, whatever it is. They need the information, and yes, you've transferred it to them digitally. So what solutions are available now for controlling their use of that information that are beyond what we have today?
Well, and I think what we have to rely on, we need oversight over this. We need data protection commissioners, privacy commissioners, organizations that will ensure the proper use of this information and the limited, restricted scope of it that is only being revealed to you at the airport, for example, if you work there, for purposes of authenticating this individual in terms of vaccine passport or whatever. And that beyond that, you are not permitted to share, disclose that information with any other third parties who are not required to be part of this process. So you need some kind of auditing or a third party oversight. Someone has to ensure that this is in fact taking place in that manner.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so this is going to tie in. I see another question's just coming from Peter Bachman. Asking about, well, what's the business relationship of IATA, the International Air Transport Association, ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, which ICAO is the global authority for the passport system, right? And IATA for airline interoperability. And IATA is, of course, the travel pass. So he asks, so they've been working for a long time on machine-readable travel documents like the e-passport. They seem to be a major set of requirements. Do they have insider access to country master lists of passports?
I do not know the answer to that. I'm guessing that they do, but I may be completely wrong. I've never looked at this. But here's what I wouldn't want. I wouldn't want IATA, if I'm at the airport and I have to present my information, and I do digitally, and I'm allowed to, enter the plane. I don't think that information should be shared with third parties like IATA and others. I don't want my information floating around out there. Why would that have to happen?
So again, I'm participating now in the IATA Identity Management Council, and I'm happy to say they are the biggest believer in the decentralized paradigm.
I know.
Yeah, and
wonderful.
So I'm not authoritative for IATA, but I'm certainly not for ICAO. But I know their design is that they have no access to that information. Right?
Excellent.
They're all about
to hear that.
Exactly. The pairing of any digital health credentials that you accept into your wallet with your passport, which is what you need for international travel, takes place within your digital wallet locally. It does not involve any outside service, and that is what you will use to verify when you go. So they're at the other end of the spectrum, and they've actually been very clear. This is a requirement for meeting with privacy requirements in jurisdictions throughout the world. They basically, as I said, they have to go to the highest common denominator, not the lowest. So they're full on decentralization, full on zero knowledge proof, cryptography, and selective disclosure. So it's
wonderful.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
delighted to hear that, Drummond. That's excellent.
yeah, exactly. And I know we're just about out of time. I am going to show sort of the other part of the answer to that question when we talk about governance frameworks, and I'm going to show this slide about what we're doing in the Good Health Pass Collaborative, the design of the it's literally governance architecture, and this will be part of your trust by design, right?
Yes.
This governance framework we're creating, think of it as it's not just a privacy policy, right? It's a whole set of policies about interoperability and security and privacy and safety of digital health passes.
Yes.
We're designing it, we call it a general ecosystem governance framework. It sets a set of requirements for specific ecosystem governance frameworks, and they can be for a country, right? Every country can say, oh, this is how we're going to do it here. It can be for an industry like IATA that says, here's how we'll do it across the airlines, or it can be for a specific application such as that already exists in Singapore and the UK. And they all can say, yes, here is how we implement these policies. And therefore, and by the way, they're the ones that also say, and here's our trust registries that verifiers can use to verify that a credential, a test, or a vaccination was issued by an authoritative approved source. Right.
Beautiful.
And that's how it trees out. And I'm a particular strong fan that, and we can do much better in privacy policies because we can establish much more general policies that will be binding on the verifiers that are subject to these specific governance frameworks.
I couldn't agree more, Drummond. Excellent.
Excellent. All right. Well, on that, I think I know we're at time. I'll stop sharing again. And I once again, the questions have piled up beyond our ability to answer them all. But we will, we'll try. We're going to do a follow-up, and I think we'd like to invite you to do a blog post with us where we summarize some of our key points here and sort of directives going forward. Because
I would love it. Count me in.
Good. It is. I really love the fact we are at an inflection point for privacy by design. And I'm speaking on behalf of Evernym and the Good Health Pass Collaborative. We're thrilled that you are collaborating with us and continuing to lead the world in the right direction for privacy.
You're so kind. And it's my pleasure to work with you and to work with Evernym, Drummond. I love it. So let's keep doing this.
Very good. Very good. We will do that. All right. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
All right. Goodbye to everyone.